We've got to keep what our chief objective is today. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, welcome back everyone. And we're going to be working on our workshop to do with our local water done well. So got Sharon and Martin there to lead us through this. So over to you guys. Thanks. And I think we've got Liz online as well. So Liz, I'll try and keep an eye on you for having input into our various discussion points that are on the wall so that we don't leave you out. Yeah. Okay, over to you, Sharon.
Okay, so this is our first workshop on local water done well and our project plan. So it's a follow-on. Is it going to go or not go? No.
Oh, there we go.
Now we're going. Cool. So the follow-on from the report that went to Service Delivery Committee this morning. So the bill's now been introduced into Parliament, and we're starting to already work on our current state and pulling that information together. So phase one of our project plan was outlined in the report. So it's the development of our intervention logic map. So that is the key focus of this workshop this morning. And also in that phase one, we're looking at our current state. So our level of service, our compliance, finance, asset conditions, and our capital delivery program. And then of course our delivery confidence at the end of that. So we think that there's some really good value about looking at an intervention logic map at this stage, just to really get some focus around what are our actual problems and what can we actually influence and do. Okay, so what is an intervention logic map? So it's really a process to determine clearly what our current issues or challenges are, so our problems. And it's a visual demonstration, so it's demonstrating that relationship between what's our problem, the interventions, the benefits, and then the outcomes that we're sort of looking for at the end. So, and it will also help us feed into going forward into any work that we do. We can come back, keep going back to this map and making sure that we're actually aligning with what we said at the start, and are we addressing those problems and those interventions that we intend to. Oops. Did you got it? Cool. So what's it going to tell us? So it's going to tell us our current issues or challenges, so our problems, our possible interventions, benefits if the issues are resolved, and outcomes sought from our water services delivery into the future. So this next slide just gives a bit of an outline of, I probably can't see it very well up there, but just an idea of how it looks. So when we're looking at the problems, some of the things to look at is our funding and sustainability, our capability and our delivery, and any risks that we have there. It then moves on to the interventions, benefits, and outcomes. So just an example that we've put up on the board, water's debt is limiting council's ability to invest in other projects supporting aka and community wellbeing. The interventions, implement new local government LGFA financing tools, and then the benefits that will flow on and our outcomes. So that's just an example that we've put up there just to sort of show you how it works. So what we're wanting from you in this workshop is we want you to identify what problems has Waipa currently got that you see. So that's our starting point. So everyone's got in front of them, sorry, can you just sit that again? So everyone's got in front of them a little pad of paper, and if you haven't got a pen, let me know and I can find some more pens. So we'll start off with the problem. So if we'll just take, I don't know, 5 minutes, everyone can just jot down their problems, and then what we'll do is we'll flip them up onto the sheet of paper that we've got up here, and we'll work through them. Everyone can just sort of go through what your ideas are, and we'll work through those, and then we'll move on to the next intervention slide. So, Dawn, did you want to add anything?
No, I think it's great. And as I say, this is the crux of it in terms of what, from your insights that you have to our waters activity, are our current problems, such that looking at any other options, we would be looking at how can we solve those problems. So it's really thinking about the problems. And whilst we've kind of talked about, is it a funding, is it a capability in delivering, a resourcing, or is it a risk that comes to mind? Not worried about sort of categorising them now. It's a matter of just capturing the thinking. So that's what we're after. So yeah, no. Look forward to your feedback and thoughts.
And Liz will check in with you when we start putting them up on the board.
Yeah, we'll take a microphone up to the different sheets so that, Liz, you can hear us when we're discussing it. Yeah, I think that's the idea. All right, get writing, people. I'm just thinking, like, when you're doing a business analysis, you don't just limit yourself to your problems. Like, I'm thinking of SWOT analysis, stuff like that. So that's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Would we likely to do something that in the future, or not? Is that going to happen as well?
I think we'll look to the I guess the leadership and guidance coming through from our project governance group around those sorts of things. As we sort of talked about earlier, there's layers of complexity to this work in terms of a rhythm that happens alongside other thinking in the Waikato. Equally in terms of seeking professional advisors alongside us to help us in some of these things. So absolutely, I think there'll be other tools in our toolbox that we'll look to utilise. But this was one I thought was a good place to start in terms of that, sometimes it's kind of just articulating what these things are is quite helpful.
Okay, cool, thanks.
I don't look with rose tinted glasses on, be open and honest, and I won't be offended.
You're not going to take it personally.
I'm not going to. No.
That's interesting.
Oh, we're putting, sorry, sorry.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Magical mystery phone call. As you're taking them up, are you guys prepared to maybe speak to them as we're putting them up? Because I'm thinking we'll get high levels of duplicates as well, but it might be worth just sort of speaking to them as you're, yeah. I'm just seeing very large numbers of problems going up, so yeah.
Okay, should be enough. This is the chance.
Well, that's awesome. It's given us a lot of little sticky notes to have a look through. So we sort of broke them a little bit. So one group here that we're looking at is around the growth aspect with the cost of tier one legislation. Meeting the demand of infrastructure of new industrial land and residential large lot subdivisions. Growth in new waters infrastructure needs planning coordination, best possible price. Sensible long-term planning for growth. Consuming large pots of our debt capacity and growth costs and slow DC repayments. So anyone want to expand a little bit further on your thoughts on growth and how that's fitting in?
I'd just like to say, I see that as pretty important for Waipa because we've been a high growth council and I think a heck of a lot of work has gone into like future proof and other ways that we plan for growth so that it's as efficient as possible because I think it's hugely expensive and if it isn't managed well, it can increase costs for residents or developers significantly. We fund it in a particular way and I'm quite concerned that we're looking at possible changes. We need to understand what the implications might be if the funding is changed. For instance, developers pay for the capital cost. Some of our other councils, they actually get general ratepayers to pay for the capital cost. that would be a huge increase for our ratepayers, about 25%, yeah, on our current rates, yeah. So just conscious of that as well.
Yeah, I think growth, the management of growth and actually being masters of our own destiny in terms of growth is concerned. And if it is an entity that goes outside into a larger, so let's say, Waikato entity, then obviously that entity will set priorities. Where are we going to go and what control do we have over the management of our growth?
Thanks. Anyone else? Oh, Lou?
Yeah, I'd just like to raise the fact that we've actually been impacted by Tier 1, which has meant that there's development that we had not planned. It doesn't go through resource consent in a lot of cases, and puts our infrastructure under stress as it's more housing in an area that's built already and has infrastructure. And you've got to upgrade pipes, sewage and water supplies to supply that area. So it actually has an ongoing cost. Particularly when you look at some of these developments like we have on Cambridge Road, where there's a significant amount of more pans and demand for water in one small area and linking into what was the existing infrastructure. So that also has had an impact on us with this sort of infrastructure.
Oh, yes, Mike?
Didn't put it up there. I'm just thinking back to one of those data graphs and one of the meeting this morning. In June, July for Cambridge, the water was really down, and we determined that possibly that was because Fonterra was sort of less production at that point in time because it's such a big water user. It's not a problem, but I just can't understand where it might go up there. But in terms of, it's the second oldest plant in the country, that Fonterra site. Is there a plan in the next 20, 30 or whatever to upgrade that, and what would water usage look like if it had a bit of a change of purpose, whatever? So that's just maybe an opportunity, which...
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I asked whether or not we'd do a SWOT analysis, because I just thought those industrial users might be, they would come up with strengths and weaknesses. Yeah, opportunities and threats, yeah. But yeah, just on this growth thing, Sharon, sorry, there wasn't anything about PC 26, which is this intensification plan change that is just coming through. And it's exactly what Lou said, where we might be responsible for one-off or out of sequence infrastructure upgrades that we hadn't anticipated before. So I don't know whether or not we should just put plan change 26 up there or intensification. Yeah, because I think, yeah, thanks for raising it, Lou.
The growth does get fed through into the delivery plan as well. So as part of our delivery plan, we do have to address some growth stuff in there. So it's good to acknowledge these up front. Okay, so compliance, higher standards for compliance and quality, water quality regulator compliance, asset condition assessment accuracy, water standards so high we're almost putting drinking water through into river. Oh, I can't quite read that writing. Water quality standards are not always compatible with users' willingness to pay. So yes, like I suppose all the legislation is pointing that compliance costs are going to increase. So yeah, that's probably our challenge, is how we're going to fund those and manage those, as well as meet those compliance standards at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yes, Mike?
Yeah, hey, just sort of on that, we had a quick discussion in the pre-meeting and just asked the question around, all of our water that we can drink, our potable water, we also flush down the toilets, which a lot of countries don't do. And the answer was because you've almost got to double the infrastructure sort of thing. But is that something that should go up there too, and in terms of particularly around some of this industrial stuff, that, how much good drinking water do we feed into some of these places that maybe don't have to have that standard of? Residential, I can understand you can't dig the town up and put a second lot of pipes in, but moving forward, could that be something that we could write somewhere just to think about when the time came that it would make sense to be able to use, recycled water?
I agree. I think that there's an expectation from the community that we're shown to be being sustainable or reusing as much as possible, whether that's industrial water reuse or collecting rainwater or stormwater in a sensible way at the moment. Yeah, I think there's an expectation that, we need to demonstrate sustainability. Yeah. Oh,
On
Sharon, could you just hold the microphone?
Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah.
Long-term assets are loan funded on long terms that are shorter than asset life. Lack of finance, retaining quality water staff, debt limits constraining investment, affordability of all aspects, renewals, maintenance and growth, getting the debt off our balance sheet, council carrying the debt for growth component until sale. Is there a better mechanism?
So a lot of that is around debt and financing. Was part of that the delivery of the Capital Works program as well? Or is that covered somewhere else? The fact that it's a stretch to actually complete the capital works that we had planned or not? It was sort of mentioned in one of those, yeah. Yeah, so maybe we could add that up. Yeah. Could we just go into a bit of depth around that? So what are the difficulties about delivering the Capital Works program? I mean, it's not just having the right staff, is it? Because there's a lot of coordination work. And then what else? Like access to various
Contractor availability.
Contractor availability, yeah.
Yeah.
And the fact that we're competing
Yeah,
against our neighbours and their neighbours,
yeah,
and
yeah.
the
So good
prices
to
just
unpack that.
jerry rig up, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, cool, great.
More there on the financial space?
Yeah, I mean, it did mention that it's difficult to refinance it or move it off our books. Yeah, because, yeah, okay. Oh, yes, Lou?
Perhaps there's no recognition of structures under the ground as assets. We find that very difficult to actually have them valued and recognise when we're borrowing money. They're not actually recognised until they're actually on our books as such. So there is a problem there, I feel, where you've got stuff going in for DCs, all right, but the infrastructure under the ground is not actually recognised as an asset. Although we've got it there, it doesn't come off or charge against our asset limits. Do you understand what I'm saying here? Or am I getting
Sorry,
that
I'm not
Yeah.
100%
Okay, what I'm
clear.
saying is our debt limits, we cannot take away on our debt limits the actual infrastructure that we've put under the ground at the site. Well, we've got debt on it, although we own it and we're paying on it. Can you understand that, or was I making that a
Is
mess
that
of
to
it?
do with recognising the asset before that the developers put in?
Yeah.
But it's not taken onto our books, but we've got the
Into ours
debt?
so that it doesn't come off as a debt because it's actually in the ground and we actually have
Or
ownership
is
of
it,
it.
so is that when it's recognised on it? I didn't know if that made a difference. I thought it was the fact that there's a delay between when we
Yeah,
do
there
the
is,
work
and
and
that's what I'm
collecting the
saying, yeah,
DCs. There's a delay
Absolutely.
and we don't have control over, yeah.
Yeah, there's also the
Martin.
delay in when the infrastructure's built and it's vested in us, and that's before we've got any DCs. So we start depreciating it from that date and maintaining it. That clock starts, even though it may not be used for a few years. So there is that hit early on
Yeah, so
before,
it's a
even when
mismatch,
yeah, it's a bit of a
mismatch
mismatch
yeah.
that we are funding that through depreciation from day one. Yeah.
Thank you. I
So
made a mess of it.
do we want to put that up on the, do we want to put that up on the problem sheet? Yeah, if you could just write that, Martin, that'd be great.
Although I'm just a word of caution, I'm not sure we're ever going to be able to solve that one, because the reality is we've got to provide that trunk infrastructure from day one. And then as the growth happens and they connect into it, it's, yeah.
Yep, all of it.
Stuff like we once it's vested in us, we're appreciating on that, and there may be no ratepayers there for a period of time.
Yeah, so well, yeah, but it does mean that that mismatch means that that depreciation is probably being funded by the wider ratepayer base. And really, it would be better if it could be funded from the DCs. Yeah.
So I think we'd be struggling to fund it from DCs because DCs is all capital fundings. We
Oh, okay.
depreciation, yeah. So we're very,
So it's a lag. It's not a mismatch. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
okay, then we've got water resource under pressure in terms of quality used and leak management. Keeping good water pressure on is a key level of service.
Okay.
So anyone want to expand? Okay, then we've got some one-off ones. Iwi aspirations and engagement. So, yep, and I think that's something as a governance group we'll work through. 3 waters and 2 waters, open pipe, closed pipe. So just to be clear, our delivery plan needs to be for the 3 waters. The model after that could be just for the 2, but the plan needs to include the 3 waters.
Okay. Right.
Future of clams, algae blooms.
Yeah,
Management
there might
of
be other
those.
biosecurity risks too, actually. I mean, those are the ones we've got at the moment, but, you know, we're all told that the way the climate is warming, we could have further biosecurity risks. Yeah.
Clear picture from central government. So no, I
Oh,
think.
yeah, where's the interventions? Yeah.
I think it's just probably, you know, like being aware of the legislation coming up, being all over it when it does come in and having a plan in place to manage that going forward to meet timeframes. Pre-funding of infrastructure. Oh, you've done that, sorry. Ratepayers want to see evidence that water delivery is efficient, cost is reasonable. Oh, yes. Possibly providing a non-fluorinated water source in Cambridge in the future. And then we've got some which are probably looking more towards the CCO option, so helping neighbours, what are others doing, retain control of our dynasty growth, i.e. growth zone, infrastructure and development, accountability of any CCO to Waipa ratepayers, influencing the statement of intention of a CCO, large future costs of Hamilton City, i.e. water meters. If it is regional, how do we balance the influence of larger councils, i.e. Hamilton City?
Yeah, that's good. Yep. People think, yeah.
I want to hear from Martin what he thinks the problems are that we've missed.
Yeah.
No, I think for me, the key one, and I was touched on that lightly, but resourcing is going to be a major challenge going forward regardless. But if our delivery plan outcome was to that we could deliver 3 waters ourselves and not join a larger entity, then there's, you know, the resource risk could be those people that want to go further would go to a larger place to further their career and could struggle to get good people. On the other hand, people may not want to work for a larger thing, so it might be double-edged, but I think the greater risk is people leaving. That's a CCO risk. Our current risks are still people. We still struggle to get good people all the time. So that's an ongoing risk that we live with every day, which is what keeps me awake, is that thought of how do we find new people when people move on? Yeah. On the whole, we've invested well in our infrastructure above ground. We've got some renewals, you know, our renewals are always reduced. So we've probably got at some stage got some catch up to do. And so we need to bear that in mind when we're doing our delivery plan on how we manage that. But overall, WIPO has invested very well in their 3 waters.
Thanks for covering that off, Martin. Could I just ask you to talk about future technology or, using stuff that, I suppose it's the Internet of Things, the applications that might make it easier to manage the water network and that, like, do you feel that that's a key issue for Waipa?
Again, there's lots of opportunities now, and we can certainly, the more you use those tools, the more data you can collect. But it costs a lot to do it properly, and you want to have automatic valves everywhere that reduce pressure to certain zones or direct water to where it's needed. All that stuff is capable there and can be easily connected, but it's quite a large capital cost
Right, yeah.
to get that underway.
Yeah, so cost benefit might be
Yeah.
difficult to, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, no, thanks. Roger?
Yeah, just going back to the control and facilitation of growth, we currently have the opportunity to put in place development work agreements, which is offsetting DCs against the infrastructural work that's required for a growth. So if it were an entity that was without or outside of our Waipa DC, that would limit that opportunity, wouldn't it? So, I mean, that's a good practical solution in a sense.
But I'd say a new water entity could have a similar agreement.
So it'd have to be a double agreement kind of thing, wouldn't it?
There'd be an agreement from council for road and infrastructure and the like, and then a separate agreement, similar to what Watercare do in Auckland, where they have a separate agreement with a developer. Yeah, so it's not impossible.
It's possible.
Yeah.
The other thing is that CCOs have a range of tools available to them that we don't, so that we have to outline our capital works program well in advance in our LTP in order to charge, whereas a CCO can charge a connection fee, not necessarily linked to a 10-year plan. So quite a different mechanism to garner funds. Just to pick up on the Internet of Things, thing that we miss out on is, for want of scale, is that our really high capital intensive projects we do once in a blue moon. And so we're captured to an extent by consultants. So having a lack of scale and a lack of off-the-shelf solutions to things means that you've got a consultant redesigning a waste treatment plant, a resource consent, a couple of $1 million fees realistically for the Cambridge wastewater treatment plant consent. That sort of.
Okay, yes, Monty.
I've just got a very specific question here. Has anyone done any thinking about if you continually jacking up the price of water, that people opt out of the system and just put a water tank and a pump out the back of their house? This is in the electricity system, the same thing happens. People put solar and batteries, they opt out of the system. And I read a paper a few years ago from the Parliamentary Commission for the Environment about this, and it begins to undermine the economic viability of the grid, because you get in this death spiral where you get fewer and fewer users on the grid. And the water one's particularly interesting too, because we meter and charge water, but that funds the wastewater. And so if you're in town and you opt out of the freshwater delivery, you're still utilising the wastewater. So is that realistically a problem, or it's not on anyone's radar and it's unlikely to ever be a problem?
Answer the second part first. We charge wastewater separately.
We do?
Yep.
Yeah.
So you have so we charge volumetric water, and you get charged in your rates for wastewater.
Isn't it volumetric though?
No,
Not-
wastewater is
it
not
is in
volumetric.
Auckland.
Okay, sorry, I thought it was. Thank you,
Yeah.
corrected.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the second, but again, we would try and encourage people to put in rainwater tanks at the moment to reduce that demand. If people do opt out of connecting to the network, we currently charge them 50% of the network charge. So they could, if they're within 100 metres of a pipe and they no longer wish to have a connection, they still have to pay half the network fee. So we do recover some of the costs of providing that. Yep, if everybody did it, we would
Probably make it 100%.
make it 100%. But yes, but equally, if it got to grand scale, you would, because of our infrastructure's in the ground, you would reduce, your income would be reduced, but the pipes are already there, I suppose. So
Inevitably, our rainwater tanks run dry, and they then have to get potable supply from somewhere, and inevitably that's us. Critically, we need to sell a certain volume of water to repay the capital we've got invested. So we don't like water tanks to a large extent. But you'll find the price point for our water makes it really difficult for people to recover the capital investment they need to make to put a water tank in. Our water is quite cheap.
Great discussion.
Yeah,
Okay.
sorry, I've just got a couple of others here that as staff we've sort of fleshed out. So just, yeah, really to get some feedback. So one of the risks is cost of establishing or changing our current delivery method. So potentially.
So that means like changing to a CCO model. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. I agree. Like before, earlier on in this process, we were kind of hoping we'd get funding from central government to help with those costs, but it looks like we'd have to bear them ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, but it could be also even if Waipas Ladies Home is setting up a waters business unit, so it can be financially independent, still comes with a cost associated with that setup.
Yeah.
Community view on cross subsidisation, which I think we sort of did touch on briefly up there. So government direction is to join with others in a CCO establishment, which may not be the optimal solution for Waipa residents, which may include higher costs. And I think the others we've pretty much covered.
So Sharon, I hope that you're going to add those 3 that you read out onto that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
those
Okay.
ones
I'd
there.
like to check if Liz is still
Yeah.
online and if she's got any other things that she wants covered, or I can't see you there, Liz, but yeah, just yell out if there's anything else you want to add. Oh, here she is. I hope you said that you're all good. That's what it sounded like. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, Sharon.
Now move on to interventions to those problems. So if everyone wants to jot down on their little bits of paper of what's some interventions that we could actually put in place to help some of the problems that we've identified over here.
I think in some ways, the problems that we've identified are quite broad in term. And to look at the interventions, we need to have a little bit more understanding of what those problems are and what the influences are of those problems. Because if you know the influences, you can consider appropriate interventions. But I would have a difficulty in some of those in thinking, well, you know, where do we start looking at interventions? Because
That's a really good point, Roger. I'm wondering whether or not if we give a bit of structure to it, maybe if, Sharon, if you take, you know, the top one, yeah, we go in a clockwise circle or something, and if you read it out, and then maybe you could get people to put up what they thought the intervention might be, if we've got enough time to do that.
So if we look to start off with around our financial constraints, I suppose what we've picked up here. So what interventions do you think that we could put in place to help financially make us sustainable going forward?
Okay. So I think one of the ones will be tools that allow us to get debt off our books. Yeah, so I'll just write that. Any other things? Like what about controls around the collection of DCs? I mean, at the moment, there's no levers that we use to ensure that the DCs are paid, you know, in a particular timeframe. You know, I mean.
So Claire, there are a range of interventions you can include in your policy, such as taking DCs at the earliest opportunity. Or you can delay them to assist the cash flow of developers until the dwellings are actually built. So you can alter your cash flow based on your policy.
So I guess what I'm wanting to know is whether or not council is sort of managing these as closely as they should be, or if we should be much more proactive in it. Because at the moment, the situation that we're in may have been contributed by us being really kind and understanding and probably putting the needs of the developer before us. That's what I'm trying to get.
there's some influences that are external to us. We've got no control over in that regard. I mean, the economy is one, you know, and we're finding that's a big influence currently, and we've got nothing that we can do about that.
Yeah, so I mean, we do have to watch that we don't put developers to the wall. But equally, you could have a line in your policy requiring staff to pick up DCs at the earliest opportunity. Now, that could be upon the issue of a section 223 notice, which is basically here's your subdivision, here's your approved survey plan. They're still a long way from getting their title at that stage, and they've got massive cash flow issues to deal with. So that's why in many circumstances, depending on the developer, we've negotiated to collect right at the end of the process. That's to assist the developer's cash flow. But you're right, we can go earlier.
Yeah, and I guess that might actually need to be a collaboration with the developers or the development community so they can understand, what we're facing and come to some sort of, closer arrangement, I guess. Yeah. Another thing that I'm concerned about, it might not necessarily be in the interventions, but it's to do with how the length of time we take debt out for, like it's generally 30 years, is that right? There was something about the financing of debt does not match the age of the infrastructure. Okay, so now I'm not advocating that we take out loans for 100 years or whatever, but I do think we need to have oversight over the pipeline of capital works that we need to be doing for water and understanding the cadence of repayment so that we are recovering a certain level of debt ceiling again, like on a regular basis, so that we can continue financing. Because I think at the moment, I think we're pretty good at financing that longer term. I mean, it's unusual. I mean, I can remember when we introduced the 30-year one, it was shorter then, but we still had to be mindful of what that horizon is and make sure that we maintain capacity over that longer time period to be able to start new projects and finance them, even though we might not have paid off the earlier ones.
Yeah, so it's a shame Ken's not in the room, but it's the rate at which you pay the capital down. So the LGFA covenants will only allow them to borrow money in tranches of about 9 years. But what we did when we looked to optimise debt is that instead of paying capital down over 20 years, we decided to pay it down over 30 years. So we have optimised the debt arising out of the Cranley report. So it's the capital repayment, not the length of the loan.
But is the 30-year horizon the right one? Because we know that as time goes on, we're going to need, new capital, big lumpy stuff. And are we cutting ourselves off because we've just accepted a 30-year term when in actual fact we should be managing the whole thing so we understand where our big spikes are and that we can confidently keep within our debt ceiling.
Yeah, so remember that you optimise the debt, that is, you pay the capital down over a longer period in order to reduce the cost for today's ratepayers in the interest of intergenerational equity. And that was because we had such a big capital spend on our plates.
Hey, Gary, I got told by Ken that 30 years was the maximum we could go to. Is that not the case? Because you're saying we're borrowing it in 9-year tranches anyhow. Could we even push that out longer on certain ones?
I would have to check with Ken. It's a shame he's not in the room, but we have gone to 30 years. A lot of this infrastructure goes a lot longer than that.
Yeah, and so that was my point, that you kind of want to match. To be honest, it doesn't change your debt position because you're debt funding it. It's the repayment schedule that changes.
Yes, the repayment.
But just as a sort of philosophical thing, you want the users of the asset to be paying for it, right? It's good policy. So it just struck me that 30 years isn't very long for some of this really long-lived infrastructure.
Earl White spoke to it a few years ago and he said that it's because the initial financing is usually limited to 5 or 9 years. And so it just gets renegotiated, just gets rolled over each time and you determine how much capital you'll repay in that next period. Yeah, so in fact, you can almost indefinitely finance. Yeah.
So as an intervention, do we actually look to just to revisit what our current practices are and just see if, what we can actually do in that space?
Yeah, right. Is that enough discussion on that point then? Yeah.
So what problem are you trying to solve? Are you trying to keep prices down for your consumers?
I was thinking more of capacity to finance over the long term. That, because you don't want to be constrained all the time. I'm thinking that we're going to have to spend a lot more investment in I suppose, levels of service, increasing, our network performance. And so our capital requirements are going to be larger than in the past. Yeah.
Is the cost of water at the right level?
Yeah.
You know, it's cheap at the moment, and is it priced correctly
Yeah.
to sustain that 30-year or 50-year window?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
All
on
right.
that, an intervention could be to actually look at increasing our water charges.
Yeah, I think we should review, how we finance from charges that would cover both capital repayments and renewals, I guess, or increased.
So Claire,
levels of
are you
service.
looking to create capacity for more debt, more capital? And you would do that at the expense of existing consumers? You'd be happy to swing the balance in favour of creating capacity for debt as opposed to keeping the price down, which is what we did on the back of the Cranley.
I think we need to have great visibility over how we're pricing stuff and what it's able to deliver and what it doesn't deliver. Yeah, I don't want to make a call right here and now that, because, you're going to get into the argument about, are you loading up too much on current generations compared to future? So you've got to have a really well-reasoned argument to demonstrate that you can do both, that you're being, I suppose, really, really good stewards of the current network, but that you have also taken into account those future generations and how the two are actually either aligned or balanced or, yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, Mike.
just tell me then, so if you pay something down over 10 years, let's say compared with 30 years as a resident, then the repayments are obviously far less, which you go to a bank, you can borrow more because you've got more headroom between income and expense, right? And at the moment, all our water is as part of general debt, isn't it? It is not separate. In its current state, our debt ceiling is made up of everything, including infrastructure for water, right? And so if you just keep elongating this, then the people around this table in its current state can just keep borrowing money for pet projects or whatever down the track. That's the risk with just elongating. Different if we can take it off the books and that's sort of separate, then hey, I've sort of got much more sympathy with what you're saying. But the risk I see is that, mate, I think councils are pretty good at spending, if there's debt ceiling and people are hitting out for projects that are nice to have for the community to live, work, play, blah, 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 then there's quite a bit of risk to that, I reckon.
I mean, those are great comments. What I'm concerned about is that we take out debt that's going to, for a project that might last, give us assets for say 50 years, but we pay it off over 30 years. But in 30 years' time, we've got another big project. And have we got enough debt room? Because we still, got those, well, we might have paid the whole lot off. We might have extended it further. I don't know. I'm worried that in 10 years' time or 20 years' time, have we got enough debt room to start another project?
Yeah, but just on that, hey, as a councillor, I've got no idea how long our loans are for. Yeah. And unless we're going to be finished with that regularly, it's just what you're saying is, for me, theoretical. I mean, I've got no idea when loans come on and off, and this debt ceiling would obviously change over the next 30 years. And someone like Ken is going to know exactly, in theory, if we just keep going what we're doing over the next 10 years, our debt's going to be here. As we sort of see that, but it's easy to spend money if there's a debt ceiling in front of you, because you're not really thinking 20 years down the track.
So maybe what you're saying is we need better reporting that covers that longer period of time.
I think where you're heading, Claire, we can keep generating reports till the cows come home, but we sort of need to know what the aim is. So why don't we just record that we're after a sustainable financial model?
Okay, yeah.
And then we can.
Brilliant, Gary. Yeah.
Because we haven't got a debt problem, we've got a revenue problem, haven't we?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
That's the issue.
Okay, yep. Cool.
And then we've got the ones around here around the CCI options, I suppose, the influence that we've got, working with like the bigger councils, Hamilton City Council, i.e. water meters, those sorts of options. So interventions around those. I suppose I could put a couple forward, but you guys go.
Anyone keen to jump in? Otherwise you could lead it away. Sharon? Yeah.
So I suppose as part of this whole project, it's looking at those options. You know, do we look to create a standalone CCO? And that's going to potentially give us more access to the debt funding. Do we look to join a regional or a sub-regional CCO? And obviously that work will come through the Waikato Water's Done Well, and some modelling will be provided there to help that. And I suppose we've got other options as well, you know, about do we provide or receive those services? So do we provide more services to some of our other local councils, say Waitomo, Tauranga? Do we look to you know, get on board with those councils, or do we look to outsource our water services in another shape or form? So happy for thoughts, discussions on that, just putting it out there.
Yeah, well, I agree with what you've said. I think what you're saying is that the intervention is that we need to be involved in those, I suppose, the analysis or the development of those different proposals at those different levels and to understand the implications. So, yeah, so we do need active involvement in the Waikato Forum work. We do need to do our own stuff. Yeah, so that we can differentiate and understand where the pluses and the minuses are, what we're giving up, but what we're gaining.
I think sometimes as well, in terms of that consideration, we really need to be aware of what our bottom line is.
Yeah.
You know, before we go in, like, we've got to be strong in terms of identifying what we want out of it and not just kowtowing to the others in the region.
Through our water service delivery plan is that we need to show that we're financially sustainable, you know, like that's a key outcome of that plan. So, you know, whatever we're looking at, that's, you know, that's sort of our end.
Yeah, I liked what you said about we need to know our bottom lines. Yeah, I'm just going to put that one.
Yeah, but equally, I think you need, there's going to be, if you join CCO, like we've been, you know, we've must have been on that journey for a long time, there are wins and losses, and you have to be prepared to accept some losses or some bottom lines not being met if it's going to proceed, because, you know, and perhaps the biggest one for me is cross subsidisation, and there's no way over time that won't happen. And if that's a bottom line, you agree that's a bottom line now, then say it early would be my because no matter how, you know, once you've built a bigger entity together, the whole purpose of them working is to cross subsidise the people that can't afford it to get better, because there's more people paying for it. That's how Watercare worked to improve the water supply and the wastewater supply for everybody. But it comes with that word of cross subsidisation attached to it. And if that's a bottom line, then a CCO won't work.
Yeah.
In my view.
Yeah.
I think there's another sort of hidden risk in the amalgamation into some sort of CCO, and that's that you slightly lose control of how development happens in your own territory.
Yeah.
And we've seen this with the power companies. You know, power used to be district council stuff. Now it's not. And you ring up you're trying to do some development now, you ring up the power guys and they say, no, not doing it. There's no capacity, you're off. And the same would kind of happen, whereas currently you've got much more integrated planning at a district level. Whereas, you know, if there is, it goes to a CCO or something, I suspect it'll actually get quite a lot harder for developers, because they've got to talk to district council for roads and other services. They've got to talk to the water people for water, and they've got to talk to the power people. That's just one more duck you've got to line up before you can do your development.
Yeah, but if future-proof or similar was really strong and manage that growth across the district, then you would already know, and it'd only be the ad hoc growth that came along that would be a problem. If you had combined planning across the whole spatial region could help prevent that from happening.
Yeah, I like what you said though about, yeah, the impacts that it might have on our ability to cater for growth if we're in a larger CCO. Susan, did you have something that you wanted to say?
Yeah, just look, some really interesting conversation being had here. Just wanted to make a comment, and I appreciate that around this table we've all been advocates for the no cross subsidisation kind of line, real hard. But I guess counter to that, I'd be really keen for us, and I reiterate this at the Mayoral Forum regularly, for us to actually think long term, like really long term, and understand that and accept that whilst there might in the immediate term be seen to be very little benefit on a, really glaring sense, benefit for us now and what might be perceived as cross subsidisation, actually in the long term, we will all win, I guess is kind of the conversation that I think we need to have. And even in the short term, even if, as you've indicated, Martin, we know that there's been really good investment in our infrastructure, and we've done the meters piece, and we've separated our waters business. We can still benefit from the economies of scale by way of consenting and that piece around not losing resource, that ability to collaborate and have more good minds on this stuff full time, which is better than a whole bunch of minds in different buildings around the greater region dealing with it in perhaps not the same amount of time. So I guess I'm just wanting us to understand that there are kind of direct financial benefits from this, and whilst we might not get that great, bolts of lightning of look at how much money we're saving and in the short term, long term there is the thinking that we would all win eventually.
Yeah, but I say, look at it, that we've invested well, so we're at the top of the curve. We've spent money, we've done well, but then over time that money's not going to need to be spent. And the next time round, in 30 or 40 years, when we need to build the next Cambridge or replace it, or the next water treatment plant, there'll be many more people to assist, and that's when that long-term benefit comes in. If you look at it short-term, you don't see that benefit. If you look long-term, one of the times will be the one that's being cross-subsidised, if you want to use that word, in the future. Yeah, definitely.
And I'd go so far as to say that perhaps in New Zealand, some of the problems that we're having in respect of that infrastructure deficit is because we have not been thinking like that.
I just got one. I think I totally agree with you, but something's been rattling around in my brain. One of our fellow councils down in the South Island, their mayor told me that I'm not even going to name it, this particular township, if they were going to meet the modern standards for water, was going to be $12,000 rates per year per household. Okay. And you see, clearly they can't afford that. Therefore, it's going to be cross-subsidised. And I've been thinking ever since, yeah, or should that village no longer exist? So, well, and to me, it probably shouldn't. If it's 12 grand to give them water and you're not prepared to pay it yourself, are you in the right place? So, yeah, so look, I agree with you. And Martin, I think it was great. You said cross-subsidisation is inevitable. That's the point. That's why you're doing it, because sometimes you'll be the winner, sometimes you'll be the loser. You're not always going to be the best. So it's inevitable, and you've got to get your head around that. But you don't want to take that to the extreme, which I would argue they're doing with this village, cross-subsidising it regardless of the cost. Whereas I'd be going, sorry, that village probably needs to disappear.
Yeah.
It needs to be their own balls, their own water tanks. Self-sufficient.
Yeah, so this is a pretty important topic, I think, about cross-subsidisation. And yeah, I'll admit I've got reservations, I've got worries about us being into a larger entity that might see high levels of cross-subsidisation, because even though we might be winners in the long term, will it mean that it's actually unaffordable for our ratepayers because of the level of cross-subsidisation? I'm wondering whether or not the intervention might be to try and do some modelling on, well, obviously I'm expecting the Waikato work to actually come up with an indication, but if we were going to entertain cross-subsidisation with, say, like Waitomo or Otronga, yeah, we could actually have a look at that and then compare it to whether or not we can achieve a sustainable model ourselves.
But the
Yeah.
other thing of that cross-subsidisation is perhaps, as Monty just mentioned, we're talking about cross-subsidising in a smaller community
Yeah.
and providing services. Well, what happens if it's the other way around? If we cross-subsidise the major large player in the entity, and I just put on the table water meters for Hamilton, you know, that's going to be a huge cost there. Is it possible to separate that out? Because I'm sure that the rest of the region is going to be reactive to actually cross-subsidising the larger entity in that regard.
I think, yeah.
And I think it's part of the work that Waikato Water's done well is sort of looking at is actually to ring fence the councils for so many years so that you haven't got that coming in initially.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
That's just one of the models.
okay. And Gary wants to say something too.
Yeah, so look, if you get proof of concept, that is, you think that scale will actually work, then you know the devil will be in the detail and how you resolve those issues. But if you think about whether or not cross-subsidisation is useful or not, in 1989 we formed a council out of 2 different borough councils and 4 different regional counties, and places like Kihikihi could not have got a sewage scheme were it not for us having a cross-subsidisation between all of our connected consumers in the sewage network. Equally, when you've got really lumpy capital like the big capital investment we've previously made in the Taumuru wastewater treatment plant and now the Cambridge wastewater treatment plant, those big capital lumps become a lot more affordable when you've got a wider base to spread the cost around. So even within Waipa as an entity, we've adopted that cross-subsidisation approach and it's worked very well for us.
Okay. I'm just making a few notes on those points. Yeah. Anything else on cross-subsidisation? I think we just prioritise any other things that on there you think that need to happen.
I was thinking that too. We all look quite blank when it came to interventions.
Yeah, I haven't really appreciated the discussion that we've had. so
Oh, no,
far.
it's a really good discussion and it's good that we're sort of, yeah, getting the basis of this and then yeah, we can go away and pull something together and bring back to that governance group. Other things that we've got on here is retaining staff and staff development. I think that'll probably just feed through into the models and how that's going to work.
Just on that though, I mean, I don't know whether or not there's any work internally for ensuring that like staff are getting support, development, succession planning, yeah, career pathways and that kind of thing. Like, is that done well at the moment? You know, it might actually be, yeah, something that's not given attention to. And if we are looking at a possible option is outsourcing to a professional organisation, that actually doesn't, that resolves the issue completely because, you know, we would have, yeah, an outsourced entity that would look after that anyway.
Passes the problem on, I don't know about. So, but yeah, we certainly look after our staff and they do get training and start and career development. But ultimately, we're a small size, so good people get stuck behind other good people. And there's,
Yeah.
you know, there's a limit there.
Yeah.
And so but they need to move elsewhere to take their next step. Yeah, which is all good as well.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and that raises a question as well, is if it was an external entity, and even if there were other external agencies that we could call on for consultancy services, is there a requirement within our own planning environment to retain a capability for water services within, and how possible is that going to be because that entity is going to be quite small and maybe there's going to be a limited opportunity for the people that may be interested in that.
Yeah, okay, Lou?
Perhaps I'll just develop that a little bit with civil defence. I didn't know you had prompting over there, Roger.
Anyway, Lou.
No, just to relate to that a little bit, with things like civil defence and things like what happened with Cyclone Gabrielle, it exposed a large amount of problems where we had some water entities that were quite siloed, and water was, and sewage and all of that infrastructure became a major problem in certain areas and other areas it didn't. And what I'm talking about here is having that ability to be able to motivate that and communicate with actually civil defence controllers, etc., with these CCOs or whoever they are, and have the knowledge and the ability to be able to react quickly enough to respond to emergencies in our local or even distant areas. So let's say Kāwhia, okay? You know, if we talk to, I know Kāwhia is one thing that's a part of, I think, Waitomo. And the problem is there that they don't have sewage, they have septic tanks, they're way behind everybody, but they have a very dispersed population over a large area. And, you know, we need to be able to control or have some idea of how we can work with all that. This is another thing that we need to have a look at is when we're doing this and consider the emergency services, you know, lens on that view.
All right, thanks. I don't know if we're going to put anything up on the interventions about staffing and resourcing. I'm just taking your point about good people having limited opportunities for advancement because of the small team. Like, there must be ways to provide opportunities like secondments or something like that where they can work outside and stuff like that. Like, is that not a feasible option? Like, I mean, if I'm trying to think, what can we put on interventions other than saying it's better to go big because it'll, be covered?
We've had some staff who've gone to comments to other councils to grow and learn other things. Generally, they don't come back. Because they've seen a bigger, brighter, or not say brighter future, but seen a different aspect on life.
Yeah, okay.
Just looking at time, I'm just wondering, I think it's been an invaluable conversation and thank you very much for all of your input. I'm picking, and Sharon and Martin, I think we've captured some brilliant stuff that will take away and shape up and, as I say, start to bring back to the project governance group. In terms of benefits and outcomes, we'll turn our minds to some of that thinking in terms of what flows through from resolving the problem statements and to that. And as I say, from the project governance group, there will be a reporting back function back to service delivery for bringing that information back to the wider group as well. But maybe if we call it at that point, enjoy your lunch. I know you've got another busy afternoon. But yeah, equally, if there's anything that occurs to you subsequently, please do feel free to fire it through to us and we'll incorporate it into this work. But yeah, thank you very much. It's been a really good conversation.
Okay.
Much appreciated.
All right. Well, thanks you for everyone's input and thanks Martin and Sharon, for leading us through it. Yeah. And look forward to, the next stages. Yeah. Thank you. So enjoy your lunch and be back at 1:00 for finance and corporate.